behalf of the Wings of Knowledge Committee, I welcome you here to a special night of mystery. I guess you can say the night is a mystery. We'll find out all about that. We have programs once every month. We are sponsored in part by Southern New Hampshire University, and the refreshments out there are sponsored in part by Campus Activities Board and the Student Senate. And we have a variety of programs coming up. Just to let you know, some of you have asked about our postponed program with Tracy Rancourt, who is our handwriting analyst and graphologist, not that I had ever heard that term before. She will actually be here on the Tuesday after the break. We have rescheduled her, so everything you ever wanted to know about your personality, which is revealed in your handwriting, and you probably don't even want to know, you can find out by coming the Tuesday after the break. And that'll be our rescheduled program. We have another big program coming up in April. That's one of our own students doing a program here, one of our foreign students. We have students from over 60 foreign countries, and the student coming in April is of all things, a pop musician from Iraq. I have no idea what that's going to sound like, but we're going to be dealing with Iraq coming up in April. Tonight's program is a special program that deals with mystery. We all love mysteries. My wife and I watched every single one of Midsummer Murder Mysteries, and we never got the murderer right once. I mean, every time I'd guess one, she was always better than me. I'd guess who the murderer was, and they'd be killed a third of the way through the picture, and I was wrong, or through the episode. But this is all about mysteries. This is about basically how to write mysteries, and we have three individuals who are also part of Sisters in Crime. Although Dale doesn't quite look like a sister, so we have sisters and brothers in crime. That's okay, we have brothers. But we have three presenters. We have Jane Seymour, who will be our first presenter. We have Dale Phillips over here, and we have Lee Wade. Lee Wade, I'm sorry. They have done a number of books you see here, and by the way, these books are for sale for those of you wishing to wind up having a book by the time you're finished.
If you buy a book, you get a free cookie.
And you get a free, right. You get a free cookie anyway. Right. But anyway, I'm going to turn the mic over to them. This is going to be a fun, informal chat with three mystery writers. And how the evening will go, I'm sure it'll be fun and it'll be a mystery. So I'll turn it over first to Joy.
Thank you. So Sisters in Crime, I was just going to talk a little bit about Sisters in Crime before we start. Sisters in Crime was started, I don't remember when. 30 years ago. That's right, it's the 30th, yeah, okay, it's the 30th birthday celebration this year. Because women were actually writing more mysteries than men, but men were getting most of the reviews. So the mysteries written by men were getting reviewed, and mysteries written by women were not getting reviews. So this organization formed in hopes of promoting women mystery writers. And it's been going strong for 30 years, so.
It's an international organization.
My name is Joy Seymour. I write as J.E. Seymour. I write fairly dark crime fiction, not traditional mysteries, just straight crime. My series is set in New Hampshire. I have 3 books out in the series. Let's see, the first one was stress fractures, then frostbite, then lead poisoning. It's about a hitman who's trying to retire with his family in the backwoods of New Hampshire. And it doesn't always work out the way he wants.
Hi, I'm Lee Wade. I live on the coast of Maine, and I write 2 mystery series for adults. They are traditional mysteries, traditional mysteries means sort of in the Agatha Christie tradition. I don't write the kind of mystery where, like, the cats solve the crimes. Mine are a little edgier than that, but they are not noir either. So, I have 2 series: the Shadows Antique Print Mystery Series, which is 8 books at the moment, and that's about an antique print dealer who solves crimes. She gets involved in all sorts of things. At the beginning of the series, she lives in New Jersey, but she does move to Maine. seems to be the thing to do. In any case, my second series, which is the one that I am happy to say I'm a USA Today best-selling novelist, that's the mainly needlepoint series, which has very little about needlepoint in it. I'll warn you right away. But because I don't do needlepoint, but that's what my editor wanted. However, there is needlepoint in it, and it's set in a harbor town in Maine, and the varying people who do custom needlepoint are involved in the plots, and there are 4 of those out now. The 5th will be out in 2 weeks, and there'll be a 6th one out in the fall. And I'm starting a new mystery series next year with a new publisher. So I'm spending a lot of time at the computer right now. I also write historical novels for young people, which are set in 19th century Maine, and they are based on real things that happened in Maine and often real people who were there and so forth. And one of them was on the Great Stone Face list here in New Hampshire. So I'm very proud of that, and my books for young people are very special to me. So I'm also, besides being a sister in crime, I'm also a Maine crime writer. Maine Crime Writers is a blog of Maine mystery authors, and we have new blogs up 5 days a week, and then sort of a summary on the weekends. But I have some bookmarks that have the site over there. I'd suggest if any of you are fans of mystery authors, particularly if there are any of them who live in Maine, I'd suggest you check it out. It's great fun. I look at it every morning and say, okay, what did someone post today? And I actually have one up tomorrow, so that'll be a surprise for someone to check.
Talking about today?
No, because I've already written it, so I've got some deadlines, so I'm kind of trying to get things ahead. So, in any case, Dale Phillips.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Dale T. Phillips. First of all, thank you all for coming out. I know it's a weeknight, and now it's dark, and we appreciate having a crowd. It's always better when you have more people in the audience than you have on the panel. That's not always the case, so we very much appreciate it. Yes, I am a sister in crime, and I asked for like 2 years beforehand. I was like, but are you sure it's okay? And they're like, as long as you're helping to promote women authors as well. I'm like, I can do that. So I have a blog, and I've interviewed a number of authors on the blog and gotten a lot of promotion for the women authors. Besides being in Sisters in Crime, I'm in the Mystery Writers of America as well. I'm also in the New England Horror Writers. If you look at the books afterwards, come on up. I write in a lot of different genres, but mystery being one of my favorites, but also horror, because New England just gravitates towards mystery and horror. I was a student of Stephen King back in college, so I got to learn from the best, and how to tell a story, how to really ramp up that kind of energy and that tension and that scariness until it becomes just about unbearable. But there's also more stories about Maine than just Stephen King tells. I have a mystery series that's set in Portland, Maine. I don't live there now, but I grew up there. Now I live down in Massachusetts, and it's like, well, apart from driving on the roads, that's the scariest part, but there's plenty of stories to be told. So we're going to talk, I think, a little bit about how we build our mystery series, if that's okay with everybody. It's called the nuts and bolts of doing a mystery. And a lot of people are like, well, where do you get your ideas from? What do you do with them once you get the idea? I mean, we see the stuff on TV and things, but where do you come up with these kind of things, especially when you have multiple series like she does? It's like keeping everything straight. So I don't know who wants to start us off here.
Joy, do you want to start? Or shall I just hold the mic forever? I'll hold the mic forever. By the way, no one said, but I want you all to know, you can all join Sisters in Crime. It's just not for authors. It's for, librarians, booksellers, readers, fans, anyone who loves, yes, anyone who loves mysteries. And we love that. And you get a newsletter and you find out all about what's going on with female and brothers, and there are about 5% are brothers in crime, aren't they?
That many, good.
Yeah, you run around the country, you find a lot of them.
Sometimes you go to a big meeting and I'll be like,
There's one over there. But in any case, there's a wonderful mystery conference, by the way, that Mystery Writers of America and Sisters in Crime in New England do down in Massachusetts every year called Crime Bake. And it is great fun. It is for fans and for authors, and there are a lot of authors who go. And it's, if you're at all interested, I don't think we have information here, but write it down and check the website, because they usually open up in May and then they fill up very quickly, so there's always a waiting list. But there are, you'll find some of those brothers in crime will be down at Crime Bake. So, in any case, with my series, I think I've started, my first series is the Antique Print Mystery Series, and that one has a lot of me in it, although I denied that for years. But my character is an antique print dealer. I happen to be a fourth generation antique dealer, although I'm frankly, I'm writing full time now, so I'm not doing the antiques. But I was an antique print dealer for about 30 years, and in addition to other jobs and so forth. And my mother and my grandmother and my great-grandfather were all antique dealers of varying types. So I grew up going to auctions and antique shows and so forth. So that was a natural place to put a mystery series. And I do have a lot of information about antique prints in that series. Then also my character in that book is 38 years old. She's younger and braver than I am, but she is a new widow at the beginning of the series, and then is interested in, you know, maybe finding another guy, maybe not. But one thing she's always been sorry about is that, as she said, she never took the time to have children, and now she's 38. So during the series, one of the sub-themes, of course, in addition to the mystery, of course, is whether or not she will adopt children, and she is considering adopting one or two older children. And I have to admit, I adopted 4 older children as a single parent. So I've had that experience, and that obviously fit into the book a little bit. And I can report, you know, spoiler alert, in the 8th book in the series, she does have a placement of an 8-year-old girl. Although, of course, not everything goes simply because it's a mystery. On the other hand, my other series is interesting because it wasn't my idea. I got a call from a friend, and then from an agent, and eventually from an editor. And basically the word was that the editor wanted a book set on the coast of Maine about needlepoint. Now, I have never in my life done needlepoint. I have bought a kit now, and I've looked at it, but I have not yet done needlepoint. I said, how about knitting? You know, I can knit. No, needlepoint. Because he was looking to be competitive with another series that was from another publisher. So I came up with an idea, and the book has been doing very well. For anyone who's a prospective author, thought you might be interested in knowing what I had to do to get that contract. Yes, I was asked to come up with a proposal. I was asked about the second week in December. What they asked for was a bio of me to show why I would be the perfect person to write a book about needlepoint and mystery. They wanted to know how to market such a series, how many people basically did needlepoint, where you would market it, what magazines, what newspapers, and so forth, what shows there would. Would I summarize the plots of the first 3 books in the series and write the first 50 pages of the first one?
That's right.
No, they gave me till January 1st. But in any case, it worked, and I got the contract, and I have just gotten a renewal, so that I've currently written 6 in the series. 4 are out now. 1 will be out in another 2 or 3 weeks, and there'll be another one in the fall, and I've got a contract for 3 more, so there'll be at least 9 in the series. And I've been writing one every 6 months to meet their deadlines. So, an example of what has to happen. So, anything you'd like to add to any of that?
Well, I can talk a little bit about where I got my idea. I didn't want to necessarily write about things that I do myself, but things that I enjoy reading about. And some of my favorite authors are Lawrence Block and Elmore Leonard. I like the darker crime fiction, so that's what I decided I wanted to write. I have no experience with hitmen. I've never been a hitman. And so I don't think you necessarily have to insert yourself into the mystery. Some people do. And that seems to be popular, that of having you have to have a platform, something to build off of. But I wanted to write what I enjoy reading. So my books are not necessarily related to my life at all. But it's fun to write because it's the kind of thing that I really like reading about and like doing. So my main character starts out, he's a hitman. He works for a family in New York, and his wife leaves him and moves to New Hampshire, and he decides to follow her. So he's never lived outside of the city in his life. He has to deal with things like going to the dump, and all the traditional small town New Hampshire things that we do. So I guess that's the connection to me, because I've lived in New Hampshire my entire life. I've always lived in small towns. And I enjoy writing about the sort of fish out of water kind of aspect of it.
Okay. One thing I might add, just because we all brought all these books and varying things, none of mine are horror, I'm afraid. But
We'll see about that.
well, depends on what you consider horror. I've got a lot of murders. In any case, I do have one book. It's called Living and Writing on the Coast of Maine, and it's a series of, the first half of it is a series of essays on living on the coast of Maine, as you said, living in New Hampshire. I find that when I'm outside of Maine, a lot of questions I get don't tend to be about my books. They tend to be about things like, and how cold does it really get? And do you all eat lobsters every night? And, basic things. So I wrote a series of essays on that, and on my patient husband, who is sitting back there, who we have been married. As I said, I adopted all those kids as a single parent. We did get married 13 years ago. He moved to Maine, and he is an artist. So we have, an artist being married to a writer has its challenges. So that's in the book, too. And some of the things that we've done as a newly married couple at a mature age. And then the second half of the book is actually on living the life of a writer and what it's really like, and some tips for people who want to be writers, things to think about, things to do, how to write a cozy mystery, how to sign a book. There's an knack to it. All kinds of things like that are fun. If any of you are interested in writing, you might be interested in that. So, back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, when it comes to mysteries, I had written one book that wasn't good, set it aside, and I said, I want to do a mystery because I believe it was Raymond Chandler said, the average book just doesn't sell or get read. He said, but the average mystery does. And as we said, a lot of us do enjoy mysteries, but you can have it about a particular thing. It can be about Needle Point on the coast of Maine, or it can be a specific character. I've got an idea for an alcoholic, ex-police detective, the kind of thing, something like that. Or it can be a setting. It can be the wilds of New Hampshire, or it can be the urban settings. I mean, I grew up in the classic sense of Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler and John D. MacDonald, even Mickey Spillane and Jim Thompson. A lot of that school of darkness and noir, and eventually the PI that developed into Spencer. He's very much from that classic school, and I think some of the early books of those were just fantastic, and then a lot of people very much responded to that. And since joining Sisters in Crime, I'm encountering so many wonderfully good writers, both in this country, men and women, and then across the pond, and then all over the world. There's people writing in so many different areas, and so many different aspects of life and culture. It lets you travel to so many different places. So when coming up with a mystery, I said, well, where do I know? So I spent a lot of time in Portland, Maine, and I said, Portland is such a cool city. I want to set something there because, so many people have set New York or Boston or Chicago or L.A. They've got those big city vibe among the mysteries, so you're one among that teeming masses. What if you have, again, a fish out of water who comes from somewhere else, and he comes to a much smaller place, and he doesn't have the connections. He's got a very troubled past, and he's trying to find out. I said, so what kind of mystery would it be? Okay, his friend is killed, and he wants to find out what happens. That's, for him, the setup is significant enough that he would drop everything and go to do this. And then the series setup is like, oh, this isn't going to be a standalone. There's more stories to tell from here. So I wanted him set there, and I said, well, in mystery fiction, a lot of times the tough guys whip out a gun and all the problems are solved. It's like, that's not how real life works a lot of times. It's like you get into trouble and you got to get out. And I wanted a character that didn't like guns or use them. And he said, it's okay. So then I had to work backwards. What in his past, what in his life would do that to him that makes him so anti-doing this, that even his own life is at risk because he starts getting sucked into some terrible situations and he's got to get out of them without the use of the very conveniently whipping out that gun. Also, it makes it a lot more interesting to write. When you've got to think your way out of a situation instead of the Deus Ex Machina, the really quick, pull the switch and everything's solved, that makes for a much more exciting book, a lot more fun. And it's a lot better for the reader if they go, wait a minute, he doesn't have a gun, and I know those guys coming out of that car, they do. Oh, how's he going to get out of this one? I mean, if somebody has one, you think, oh, they're never in trouble. Spencer was never in any danger from anybody. He could outpunch everybody, he could outrun everybody, he could outshoot everybody, he had all his friends. So he never felt like he was in any danger. He was always there. And people like that rock-like thing sometimes, but also a lot of cases, people like a vulnerable character. They like somebody that they can identify with. Few of us, I don't know, maybe a couple of you are superheroes. So if you have a mystery series where somebody just is practically wearing a cape, and they're going in and they just can't be stopped, it's like, well, okay, but that's not, real life is, again, a little more complicated. What if you have some moral complexity in what this person is like and how they see the world and how they act? Sometimes they're going to do something that they think is for the good, and it's got ramifications that are, oh boy, that's affecting people in an entirely different way, and sometimes in terrible ways. And these people have to pay a terrible cost, even for doing the right thing. Sometimes, yes, the characters encounter evil in the world and do their best to fight against it. They don't always win. It doesn't always turn out good, and it's not always a happy story, but I think it's a lot more real, and I've had a lot of people come up. I've had people in recovery from substance abuse and things like that go, wow, you nailed it. You got exactly what it's like to be at the bottom of that pit and come back from that. And that, to me, is the best compliment of all. I mean, the best kind of review ever. As somebody says, that felt real to me. That spoke to something in my life, and that means something. So when you're building a mystery, it can be elements of your own life. We were at one mystery gathering, and there was about 8 of them around, and everybody said the kind of book they had, and somebody said, yeah, you're a race car driver, so you wrote about a race car driver. You're a journalist, you wrote about a journalist. And I said, mine's a troubled ex-con. And they looked at me and went, okay, and they kind of backed away. But no, and it's set on the coast of Maine, and then he goes on to further adventures there. I have ideas for 4 other series. Again, you've got an early start on me, so I'll try to catch up in the years to come. Various types. And the whole concept of mystery, there's the cozy mystery, where all the blood is off stage. There's no sex, all off stage. There's usually a murder most of the time, but again, it's not a lot of excess gore. People feel comfortable. It's like the British mysteries where order is going to be restored at the end. People are going to go back to their comfortable lives, and things are going to be okay. That's the way you feel. I guess in Joy's novels, in my novels, you're never sure what's going to happen. You don't know what the world's going to be like when this person gets done on their rampage and going through all the terrible things that happen. And I kind of like that. I like to keep it interesting as a writer, and I think it keeps it more interesting for the reader.
Let me defend cozy mysteries.
No, not that that's any different.
No, my books I really don't think of as cozies, but just to give you an idea,
Needlepoint?
comparing, it has to have needlepoint because the editor wanted needlepoint. So I stick it in there. To give you an idea of that series, the first book of the series sets it up, and the heroine of that series, his name is Angie. Angie grew up on the coast of Maine. Her mother was the town slut. She didn't have a father, nor did she know who he was, and she wasn't sure her mother knew who he was. When she was 10 years old, her mother disappeared, went out for the evening, and never came back. So her grandmother raised her, and she had pretty much of an awkward adolescence, as you might think, in a small town. Everybody knew everything about everyone else. So as soon as she got out of high school, she did as many people in Maine and some of the other rural areas do. She got out of town, and she went west, and she ended up in Arizona. And there she tried college, but it wasn't her thing. So she ended up working for a private investigator in Arizona. She worked there for about 10 years. The first book in the Needlepoint series, Twisted Threads, starts when she gets a telephone call from her grandmother who says, "Angie, it's time to come home. They found your mother." So she goes back to Haven Harbor, Maine, place she thought she'd never go back to again. She discovers that some of the people she grew up with have changed considerably, including her grandmother, who has a boyfriend and a business, and her grandmother has the needlepoint business. She does custom needlepoint for decorators and designers and so forth. It isn't like a little shop where people get together. And the people who work with her include a retired Navy submarine person who has a poison garden and now teaches biology at the local high school. A little old lady who has arthritis, and so she can't do as much needlepoint as she used to, but she has made a living for years writing erotica under varying names, and that's a very big secret. So Chastity Falls, for example, is one of her pen names. In any case, there are an assortment of other people. In the latest book in that series, which came out in the fall, I did base it with an idea. When I was a child, I remember being on the coast of Maine, and there was a man who was very strange. He had very long hair, which he wore in a ponytail, and he lived by himself out on an island without fresh water or electricity, and he would periodically row his way into town and pick up a few supplies and then go back. And at that point, no one even really knew what his name was. Now, about 4 years after that, he was found drowned. Not to anyone's surprise, the Coast Guard had said for years that that was going to happen to him. But in any case, he kind of haunted me. I mean, this was someone I knew when I was 10 years old. So in Dangling by a Thread, which came out last fall, we have a man who is basically a hermit. He lives on an island. It turns out that he is an Army veteran, and he'd known my guy with the poison garden, who they met at a VA hospital. And so that's the one person in town he knows. But I give him a purpose. There's a reason he's out on that island. He's out there to protect the endangered great cormorants. And then a rich person sails into town on a yacht and decides he wants to buy the island, and he'll do anything to get it. And the people who are the mainly needlepointers basically get together and try to figure out how they can save Jesse and his island and the cormorants. So although the book is, yes, it has needlepoint in the background. They make needlepoint cushions to advertise, to promote the cormorants.
Does the book cover needlepoint on a pillow?
The book covers are a lot sweeter than the text, because my publisher does those. So I'll just say the covers are cool covers. They don't have that much to do with what's inside the book, and they certainly are a lot cuter. But people seem, because that is the one that's a USA bestseller, people are obviously picking it up because probably of the covers, because that's how people see books in Barnes and Noble or whatever, and they read them, and they're still interested to keep going and to find out. The one that comes out in 2 weeks is about, and this is a mystery story. At mystery conferences, often there is an auction that usually benefits a local literacy organization, and one of the things that people auction off are naming rights. So several years ago, when I first started this series, I was at BoucherCon, which is the major mystery conference in the country, and I said I would auction off rights to having an antique dealer. It could be male, female, or whatever, but this was going to be an antique dealer on the coast of Maine in my little town that I was creating for the Needlepoint series. And then after the auction, I went up to the person who was making out all the forms and so forth, and I said, well, who won it and what it, him or her and how old and so forth. And they said, oh, Sarah bought that. You need to meet her. She really wants to meet you. She's over there. And I went over, and there was this young Australian woman who had white hair that was streaked with blue and pink, and she was all delighted that she was going to be an antique dealer in Maine. So I decided I could not just use her name. I just loved the idea of an young Australian woman who somehow was on the coast of Maine. Well, in the next book, which comes out, as I said, at the end of this month, I tell Sarah's story. and why she ended up coming from Australia and ended up on the coast of Maine. And it involved a lot of scandalous things that really happened. Not to the real Sarah, but in real life. They did happen in England and in Australia basically in 1945 to 1965 that a lot of people in this country don't know about, but it ended up with her not having a family and not having lost her family and eventually ending up in this country finding it. And it turns out to be more complicated. And I will pass this on because I'm talking.
So one of the things that when you first start writing a mystery or writing anything, one of the things you have to decide is how you're going to get started and what kind of writer you're going to be. There's two main kinds of writers. There's pantsers and plotters. So plotters lay everything out ahead of time and do outlines. I know people who do 50-page outlines for a 150-page book. I mean, but pantsers write by the seat of their pants. So that means they just sit down and write. I tend to be more of a pantser. I'm not good at plot at all. I start with a character, and then I see where my character leads me. I'll put my character in a situation and let him find his own way out of it, and just write organically. So maybe our other two writers can tell us whether they are plotters or pantsers and what they like about it. I like being a pantser because I feel like I'm able to go in different directions, and the characters are what's leading the writing instead of the plot.
I started out a plotter and ended up and then wrote one book as a pantser, and it's the one mystery I've written that has never sold. I thought there's a message there. So I would say I'm a hybrid at this point. I'd have a general outline. My agent and editor want a general outline of what I'm doing, and then I go a little bit deeper to do that. But basically, I on a day-to-day basis, like what I wrote yesterday, I kind of planned out the night before. I know where I'm going, I know what the major plot points are, but I don't have it designed chapter by chapter the way I did with the first couple of books I wrote. And this seems to be working pretty well for me.
Okay, interesting question, because some people are very adamant about the type they are. Some say, I have to know everything that's going on in a book before I can get started. And some say, well, that would be boring as heck, because if I know exactly where the story's going, I'd be bored writing the darn thing because I already know everything. I, again, am a mixture of that. I start with an idea. With the mystery series, every title is taken from something in literature, a concept. A Memory of Grief comes from the Epic of Gilgamesh, where Gilgamesh's friend, Enkidu, is killed, and he just goes off the rails, absolutely off the rails with grief. Now, if you're not familiar with this, it's the oldest epic, one of the oldest stories that we know in any cultures. This is so ancient and so powerful a legend. And I said, wow, what a great thing. Imagine that kind of thing. Now, what if that translates? So every book has a resonance with the title, and that's the theme of them. And that's why it's tough sometimes. So I'll start with an idea of A Fall from Grace came about because I actually had a friend who was a small town manager. And some of the stories that he and his wife told about small town life when you're a manager are just absolutely hair-raising. I mean, people show up at your door and ask you to open the town hall so they can find their keys, and it's like 1 a.m, and you've got to work the next day, and people will call up at 5 a.m. on a Saturday for a fishing license. People will call you for somebody else's phone number. You as the town manager are expected to be on call 24/7 for anything. If you go out and help some people out, sometimes people will take offense at the way you help them out. I mean, oh, well, this was an unsafe thing. We had to get them out of their home. How could you take my father out of his home? Well, because he was going to die if we left him in there. People are never happy. And I said, so what if we have a situation like that where there's a person, but they're not a good person like my friend was. Suppose they're the other way. Suppose they and their family have manipulated this town and are taking over a lot of different things, and everybody in town hates them. So somebody's accused of killing him, and Zach Taylor comes in to find out who it is, and he's got an entire town full of suspects. And they already think they know who did it, so they don't want him asking any questions. So he's got to take on a much larger challenge than just, something of finding who was the killer. He's got to deal with the culture of small town life. And that's one of the things that I love that we get to do in mysteries. In any of the books we do, but particularly mysteries, it's like you examine what it is about that place, about these people, that makes the mystery enticing. And then we go on to other things. As far as mystery fiction, finding out. You pull things from your life. It's like a big sausage factory. Everything you know kind of goes into this big machine, and it grinds up, and something comes out. So I start with an idea. Maybe I'll know the opening scene. Maybe I'll know the ending scene. Maybe I'll know a couple of scenes in between. I come up with a scene and go, okay, it's going here. And then I start plotting when I'm into the book and I'm writing scene after scene. It'll suggest something to me. Okay, we know that he has to go here and talk to somebody. Okay, where's that going to go? And I'll put it in as chapter 11. Okay, later on, I've got more chapters coming in, and I realize actually that it has to be chapter 22 because something else has to happen first. I plot very tightly, and that makes it tough on the rewrites because you have to go and shift everything. I mean, if they did something on a Wednesday afternoon, and now you've got to backtrack, you've got to change all those chapters and go back. So I do love the plotting. I mean, I do like keeping things very tight, so on a nice tight timeline and ratcheting up the tension for that. But it does take a lot of extra work. So, yeah, I guess I'm a pantser until I get to the point of plotting, and then everything's going in a spreadsheet, and I see how things are shaping up, and they suggest things to itself. So I can't start with that. I don't know everything that's going to happen. I know some of the stuff that's going to happen, but I know the characters and the situation, and I let that develop. And as a writer, it's great to be surprised yourself by what you're doing. It keeps things fresh, and it keeps things exciting.
How about you guys? Do you have any questions? We can talk forever. You could probably tell that. But are there any?
We lock the doors. Nobody can leave until we're ready.
But are there any questions that any of you have for us about anything? We're open to suggestion.
Who are some of your favorite mystery writers or mysteries on TV, movies, anything like that?
If not, I will start talking again. Go ahead.
Cage fight.
So, I do have a question. So you say you work on timelines. Is there ever a point where you just blow through a book and it's not good, but you just have to pass it out anyway? Or do you ever ask for an extension?
I know. First of all, I really love editing because that's kind of where you make it all really work. I have asked for up to a month's extension under extenuating circumstances, generally because of personal situations that are going on. I will tell you that most editors don't like that because they have schedules they have to meet. I have a friend who shall be nameless, a well-known mystery author, who is almost always 6 months to 3 years behind on her deadlines, and somehow her publisher has not yet dropped her. However, if you're starting out, I would not recommend that as a style. Basically, if you've got a deadline, you meet your deadline. Writing is a job, and you have to do whatever, and it's not just writing, I might add. There's a lot of marketing, there's speaking, there's attending conferences, there's networking, so there's a lot that has to be done. But basically, you meet your deadlines. Joy, any addition to that?
I think that the point of writing, you have to be professional. So if you want this to be your job, if you want people to pay you for writing, then you need to be professional and you need to meet your deadlines. I've had issues with my publisher not getting things to me on time, in which case it's not my fault that we're not meeting the deadlines. Yeah. But you have to be able to put your seat in the chair and write. That's what writing is all about, and that's what it comes down to in the end. It's a job. It's like any other job. You have to do your job.
Yeah, I might, just one more thing.
We never should have put you in the middle.
No, never. I'd say for years I made a living working in corporations, and I was, among other things, an executive speechwriter. And if a speech so if an executive came to me at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and said, I'm flying to London tomorrow, I'll be back by noon because I'm going over for a fast meeting coming back, I'd like the speech ready by noon, you couldn't have writer's block. There was no such thing as writer's block. You got the speech written. And I think that's the basic thing about it. It's a job. You get it done.
The coolest thing about writing is it's whatever you want it to be. They view it as a job. I'm an independent publisher and a writer, and I don't see it as a job because a job sucks. A job is something you have to do. You have to go to, yes, I have to write, but I want to write on my terms. I want to publish on my terms. I want to do the stuff that I want to do. Not somebody says, this will be done by this date. I'm like, well, what if it's not good by that time? I'm not going to turn in something that's a piece of crap. My books are ready. My latest, number 5 in the series, it's been a year and a half. I'd like to try to produce something every year, so it's late. But you know what? It wasn't there and it wasn't good. And I'm like, I'm just going to wait until it is. And until just a month ago, things started cooking and really came together. And now, great. Now it's coming together. Now I can put it out. Shadow of the Wendigo over there. You know how long that took to write? 35 years. So you say, trying to get it out in a hurry? No, that was the first book I wrote. It wasn't good. But I didn't know how to fix it. I wasn't good enough a writer yet to know what it needed. I know it was wrong and it just wasn't there. So I had to learn through a process of years and years of writing other books and then come back to it and go, oh, okay, I see. There's no tension here. You got two people just talking. There's no tension in the scene. There's no tension for the reader. They're like two people talking. Even if they like the two people, what's the point of that? You've got to have something going on there. So you've got to move things along. So I would say, whatever's in your heart, you've got to write the kind of book that appeals to you and that you think will appeal to someone else. I mean, yeah, you can journal and you can write in your diary, which is one thing. But if you're writing for an audience, you've got to have some passion. You've got to have more than just the word count there. You've got to have something going on that really grabs people. I mean, some of the things that people never expected to take off have been some of the biggest successes. And sometimes they aim for the stars with the biggest concept going, and people are like, no, it just didn't speak to me. Just didn't move me. Write something that moves you. Give it to somebody you trust that likes that kind of thing and see what they think. And if they go, wow, when you've got somebody that stays up all night to read your book, you know you've got something going there. So there are many different avenues open. She works with publishers who have deadlines because they're commercial. I mean, they've got to have the deadlines so they can put it in the catalogs. They've got buyers that go out, sell them to the bookstores, things like that. You can also go independent and say, well, you know what? I'll put out a book when it's ready, when it's done, when everything's in place. And that's my schedule, and it's like, I don't want to think of it as a job because that's a horrible thought. It's like, I can't wait till I leave my job, but it's coming, but it's a passion. It's not just a job. It's life. It's basically what you have to do that's within you to keep writing.
Okay. Question over here? Yeah, do it one first.
I'm just going to briefly answer his. My mother used to write nonfiction, and it would always drive her nuts. She tried very hard to meet the deadline, and like you said, the publisher would, file it off to be months late. She always felt like she had to do most of the work. Why could they be so many months late? She couldn't be a day late. My question is, do people all write series? And I'm kind of interested, is this for commercial reasons? Is it, people like the series and keep on it? Or is it more for your convenience that when you develop a character, it's easier? Quit talking about that in the movie.
I know when I first started writing mysteries, everybody said you need to write a series because that's what publishers want. They like to have a series because there's already a built-in audience for the second book if the first book sells. So that's part of why I started writing a series, but also because the story is still there. I like writing about this character. As you said, the character's already there. I'd like to continue. I like to keep going with the story. If I put that all in one book, it's 3 books. It's too long for one book. So yeah, I just keep going with the story and keep going with the same character because I like that character. But also publishers do like to see a series. And I think readers I like going back and reading the same author, the same series, the familiar characters. It's it's kind of comforting to know where you are with the character and say, oh, yeah, okay, this is what she did in the last book, and just go on that way.
When I first wrote my first mystery, I didn't know it was going to be a series. I knew a lot of people wrote series, so I sort of had in my brain, if I needed to write another one. But that didn't happen because 40 Agents turned it down, and then I figured it's what the writer's book said, you have an unpublished novel in your bottom drawer. Sounds like you had one there for a while. So I put mine in my bottom drawer, and I went on and I wrote the historical novels for young people that I really wanted to write. And then by varying crooks and crannies, my book did end up with an editor at Scribner who called and said she loved it. And by the way, when is the next one in the series going to be finished? And that's how I started writing series. And right now, yes, the editors are basically looking for series, unless you're a very top name, and even then, it usually is in one genre that you write. It's not a series, but there are a series of standalones that have a lot in common with each other.
I started my first mystery, and it was going to be a standalone. That was it. It was just like, here's a cool concept, here's a cool setting, here's a great character, let's put this all together and come up. And then as I was writing it, when I got near the end, it's like, well, yeah, the story's not done. This story is done. But there's a lot more stories that he could find. There's a lot more stories that need to be told in Maine. There's a lot more things that can happen. And so, boom, the series is born. Now I'm on book 5 that's coming out soon. And I've got 4 other series planned just in the mystery genre. Plus there's thriller series, there's science fiction, things like that. Because we're world builders. When you go to all the trouble of building a complex world with these wonderful characters, think Game of Thrones. I mean, that would have never been a one-book deal. You know, they wouldn't buy it. You know, you spend 15 years, developing this thing, and then you want to go on. And a lot of readers respond to, as they said, the characters, the situations, whether it's the British police inspector, whether it's the young woman, in peril kind of things. Series are popular with readers, and it doesn't have to be. I wrote a standalone, Shadow of the Wendigo, the one that took 35 years. Simple standalone. It ends. One of the characters dies. It ends. Somebody said, when are they coming back for the next episode? What do you mean? They said, we would like to see another one. I'm like, wow, that's going to be tough. But, that's what you get. So listen to your readers. Hey, if they want it, hey, consider.
Okay. You had a question?
Or a mixture.
I will say one thing. I was in a panel at a store in Maine a few years ago with Tess Gerritsen, who many of you may have read her books, and there was a romance writer, and there was another mystery author and me. And someone said to one of them, where do you get your ideas? And the mystery author, the romance author, who shall be nameless, said, well, I go to bed at around 10 o'clock every night, but I wake up at 2 or 3 because my characters wake me up wanting to get out, and I can't sleep anymore without releasing them, so I get up in the middle of the night and I write. Now, if many of you know Tess Gerritsen, she's a best-selling novelist who also happens to be a medical doctor. She was sitting next to this woman, and she actually moved away. So I think it would be wonderful to have my characters wake me up and tell me what they were going to be doing. But unfortunately, I have to tell them. Now, Joy, do you have any of those issues or helps from your characters?
Well, not necessarily from the characters, but I have to say that the first little bits of this character that I wrote at the beginning of my first book did actually come. It was a dream that I had about somebody stuck in a culvert under some railroad tracks and why he was in. And that just stuck with me. But I built off of that. It wasn't like the whole book was a dream. There was just this one scene that I remember from, that I dreamed one night, and it was like, okay, so why is this person in this culvert under these railroad tracks? And I built off of that. So it's not like the book was written by the dream.
I don't think Joy would want to be woken at 2 in the morning by a hitman. I'm just saying. Not in the middle of the night, but writers are always writing. There's no off switch. We don't know when ideas come to us. I was driving once and boom, stuff started coming like a waterfall, and I had to pull the car to the side of the road, find some paper, find a pen, pull it out of the glove box, and frantically start scribbling down, and I got 3 generations of a family history for a series I wanted to do, and it comes like that. You don't know when or where or how. I mean, I'm a big believer in the muse. If you court the muse, sometimes she's very kind and comes and pays you a visit, and the gifts are wonderful. And when people call writer's block, they don't know what to do with a story. They don't know where to go with it. They feel frustrated. They feel that anything they put down just isn't of value, just isn't real, just isn't worth it. And writing from the heart, and you know, the people that say, write every day, and that's a wonderful habit, that's a wonderful discipline, and if you do that, the faucet will always be on. But I've got a life where I can't do that. I just can't. And it's in fits and starts. But when it comes, boy, you just don't want to argue with it. You just do it. Whether it's late at night, whether it's early in the morning. No, I don't get woken by my characters, but I have dreams that are so bizarre it would have to be like magic realism, and they're like, what kind of drugs is he on? Because these dreams are bizarre, you know, like Philip K. Dick kind of stuff, you know. You don't want to write that down because people get scared and move away from you if you do that. And let me tell you one thing about mystery writers. Anything that's in our search history on our computer is only for research, right? We practice killing people for a hobby. Okay, when people start talking, we had a little discussion last year at Crime Bake, and we had one of the medical examiners of Connecticut tell us how to actually kill a person so that she wouldn't be able to tell. And of course, you know, the minute she said that, I'm like, well, how? And it's like, so you got to get the secret out of them and go, that's good, that's a good way. But, you know, like she said about the poison garden, I don't know if you know what that is. It's a garden where everything in it is deadly to humans. And they raise all these different plants, and everything can cause death. I'm like, who would create such a thing? I mean, I want a vegetable garden. I don't want a poison garden, but some people love that kind of thing. I know. But, you know, one day we're researching cause of death, you know, well, let's see, a body stops bleeding as soon as it's dead, so you don't have a spreading pool of blood. Okay, what about knife attacks? What about falling off a cliff? It's like over and over the things, and people come in and go, what are you reading? No, nothing, it's just research. I mean, gory stuff, but sometimes it's the most normal people. The types, you know, they always said he was a quiet one. And that, not me, of course, but I meant other people, you know, like them. You'd look at them and go, really? They know 67 ways how to kill somebody with just a pencil? That's incredible. But it's a lot of fun coming up with all these different things. So do we have a time limit or? Nope. I saw you coming. I was wondering if we were getting the... Okay, well, we still got time for more questions. People, if you have anything, I mean, stuff you've seen on TV or you're like, I've always wanted to ask. Yes. I'm not going to pass this back to you.
When you're in the middle of writing a book, do you write at the same time every day? Do you write in the same place? And do you all use computers, or is there a typewriter or handwritten?
Okay, very quickly, I'll go. Sometimes, if I'm not at a computer where it's handy, I will write on a tablet and then later on get it in there. I do most of my writing on a computer, but I'm from the bad old days of typewriters. So yeah, it used to have to be the long, slow, sucky method. And anytime you had to submit a story, I've sold over 60 stories, and you had to type it up, you know, get a photocopy, get it in the mail with return postage, send it off. Now it's like I can do that in 5 minutes on the computer and send it off electronically. I do things on the computer, and that's how I write. I don't write at the same time. I write whenever I can, squeeze it in there. Whenever the muse talks, it's like, okay, I can't go to this thing now because I have to do this. It's just whenever and wherever. Some people love the routine and the discipline and the habit of having that, and that's a wonderful thing if you've got a life where you can do that.
Nobody has a perfect life. I write on a computer 95% of the time. Occasionally we'll write if I have an idea when I'm on the way home tonight or something. I'll always have I have a driver with me. My husband is here. So I always have a notebook though, and I also have paper and pencil next to my bed, because sometimes I get plot ideas right when I'm almost falling asleep, and if I don't write them down, I'll forget them. But I write on a computer, and I write in my study, and I do not write every day. I am trying to do that because this year I have
If you got 3 series going.
I have four books due this year, and that doesn't count the 2 that are coming out that have to have publicity done. So it is a job. I still feel I'm passionate about it, Dale, but it is a job. I'm trying to make a living. So So that's what you do. But I do write at my computer, and the words kind of flow directly to my fingers. It's really kind of funny. I now think and hear the scenes at about the time as fast as my fingers can type, which is pretty fast.
I wish I could type that fast.
I do all my writing on the computer. When I first started writing, which was 1970 something, there were no computers, so I did write everything. I have notebooks full of my writing from ages ago, but most of it now has been translated into computerese, and it's saved on my hard drive, and I should back that up at some point. So yeah, everything on the computer. My first novel, I had to submit in paper form. So I wrote it on the computer, but I had to print it out, and then I had to take it to a printer and have 15 copies made for my agent to send out to the various editors. I had to do all that. She wasn't gonna, she didn't want the expense. Yeah. So that, even though it was written on a computer, I still had to have the paper in hand.
Matrix, right?
It probably was, yeah. Anybody else have a question? Go ahead.
Another question. You mentioned first off the genesis of the Sisters in Crime because of the disparity in reviews. Could you speak at all in terms of who decides what gets reviewed and how?
Whoever's got the magazine or the website.
Yeah, the editors in the particular journals, it's becoming and it's a changing subject, which is one reason there's a long pause here. A lot of newspapers used to have daily reviews, and places like the Boston paper did, the New York Times did. New York Times now has put all their reviews, even for the business books that used to be reviewed in the business section, are now in their Sunday supplement. They don't do as many reviews. They review basically 4 mysteries every couple of weeks in the New York Times. I know I was reviewed in the New York Times when my first books came out. I frankly don't think I would qualify now because they're just reviewing the very best sellers. In any case, a lot of smaller places are not. On the other hand, there are a lot of blogs that review books now, and places like Amazon and BN.com and Goodreads have an opportunity for readers to review books. And those reviews are very important. They're important to the publishers, and they're important to other readers. So although there are still the old faithfuls, there's the New York Times, the USA Today, Oprah Magazine now reviews things, and you've got Kirkus and Library Journal and so forth, which are the stalwarts of the system here. But a lot of newspapers are not doing as much. And usually the book review editor or the arts editor makes the decision, and they give preference to local books often, and the major bestsellers.
Yeah, and in the past, a lot of the editors, a lot of people making the decisions at these places who were reviewing were males, and so they read and reviewed the kind of things that they liked. And now, actually, within the past 30 years, there's been a lot of advancement about so many different people and so many different aspects coming out that can be reviewed. And again, it doesn't have to be just North American, white males. It's like the world has exploded with all these wonderful books. So there's an opportunity there. And seeing on what she said, folks, if you read a good book, whether it's a mystery or not, and you say, man, that was good, and tell somebody else about it. Go on to Amazon and tell them about it. Just write a short review, even if it's 3 lines. Say, I really like this book because it spoke to me. If you're a member of Goodreads, go on there and do it. Barnes & Noble has a chance to review. Sometimes I'll review a book there. I'll be the first person that's ever reviewed a book, and I'm like, this is a famous author. This book's been out for a couple of years. It really helps because you're telling somebody else what you liked and what resonated with you about that book, so it helps a lot. And I think you had a question too, right?
I was going to ask about how often, when you write a book, how often it becomes a movie, and then if you suggest that idea, or if readers itself suggest that.
Excellent question. That's the hope. We hope that our stuff will be turned into movies. Now, you've got to understand that when the movies take over, whatever they do with it, as soon as you sign on that line, it's going to be something entirely different. I've got an acquaintance, Dave Zeltzerman, whose book Small Crimes is just being released, and it's got Jaime Lannister from Game of Thrones as the lead character, and he's just over the moon. He went to see the preview of it, and he's loving it because this is going to be a major film that's being released. It's going to give him a tremendous boost. I've got another friend that made it part of his deal to pursue people in the movie business to push his book on them, and that's being made into a movie. The thing is, usually they come to you. Somebody has read your book, and they say, there's something in there that I'd like to do with it. It's an industry, Hollywood, or even if it's a small independent filmmaker, something like that. That's the hope, is like, this is all available if they come up. It's like, we'll talk, we'll have that conversation. Within New York, they have agents, they have people that will try to contact people out in the movie business and say, hey, here's a bunch of ideas, are you interested in these, to try to manufacture that, getting the mill going and the interest going so that somebody will invest millions of dollars to try to bring your story to a larger screen.
Yeah, that basically, for most people who, it depends on whether you have an agent or not, but most people who have agents, the agencies have someone there who works on film and television rights to see if they can sell it. And if they do, what happens, it doesn't mean your book gets made into a movie, though. It means that they've bought the rights to it, which means that you get paid a little bit of money to basically hold it on a shelf for a while and say it's the option. Yeah, it's trying to be simple here. But yes, so that eventually, within a certain period of time, 3 years, 5 years, they are the only ones who would be able to make it into a movie. I know a lot of people who've had options taken on their books and no movie ever gets made. They do get a little extra money for it, though. And I know that I just talked to my agent this week about, I said I'm doing a new series next year, and he's working on the contract right now, and he was really aggravated because he wanted to keep the film rights and the merchandising rights. If anyone ever wants to make dolls that look
Action
like
figures.
Characters or
Needlepoint action figures.
whatever. Anyway, this won't be needlepoint, the next one. In any case, but he was trying to keep this, and this publisher will not let those go out, but they have a pretty good percentage. So we had this long talk. Basically, he was more aggravated than I was because I figured the chances of someone wanting to make a movie in action figures is probably pretty small. But it is it's a whole kind of thing that your agent, when you write a book, if you're going to go through a traditional publishing, then you get an agent. Your agent tries to sell the book, send it to 15 people, as you suggested, try to get the best deal they can for it, and then they work on a lot of those details for you, which is good because it gets complicated. Anything else that you have to add about movie rights?
I'll say one for TV.
Oh.
Tess Gerritsen, who she'd mentioned before, best-selling author, they did an option. They said, we love these characters in your series, Rizzoli and Isles. She said, well, okay, sure, I'll sell you the option, and thought nothing of it. Next thing they come back, and they're doing a television series on it. And then next thing you know, it's a best-selling television series, and it goes on and on. You never know what's going to happen. That's the wonderful thing. Oh, it is now, but you never know what's going to happen, and that's the best part about stories. That's what we all share. That's what we all want to find our place in the world through story. And when you've got a good one and somebody else finds that and says, I'd like that to go to a larger audience, even though it's going to be changed and altered a bit, it's still a great story, and we want to get that out. So that's the hope.
I think we're pretty much coming to a point where I think we should be ending this. If anyone has any additional questions, we're going to be hanging around a little ways here. If anyone wants to buy a book, that's fine. There are cookies out in the lobby, I believe. Cookies in the lobby? I've got that right. Okay. And
please come on up afterwards. We're up here. Come on and have a chat.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, by all means, come up, buy some books, take a look at what's up here, and yes, there are refreshments as well. Thank all three of you for being here.